All right, Parshas Toldos, again, page 135 in the Steinsaltz Chumash and 124 in the Art Scroll Chumash. I'd like to focus this year in studying Parshas Toldos on the sale of the Bechorah and what exactly is the nature of that sale. What's the nature of that of the sale exactly? Why is it being sold? And the moral question that bothers a number of commentaries, and that is, did Yaakov take advantage of Esav? Was this a manipulative sale? Was this extortion? Did Yaakov take advantage of Esav and purchase this Bechorah under less than moral circumstances? So the Parsha opens up, and the boys aren't even born yet, and yet in very short order, in a very few psukim, Yaakov's already cooking, and Esav is already hunting. In just a matter of few psukim, right? It begins, Ve'ela Toldos Yitzchak ben Avraham, Avraham Olidas Yitzchak. So Avram is the father of Yitzchak. Yitzchak ben Arvim Shna Bekachto as Rivka. Yitzchak was 40 years old when he marries Rivka. Next pasuk 21, Vayetar Yitzchak L'Hashem L'nochach Ishto Ki Akarahi. She was barren. They davened, and she was, and then she conceived. Pasuk Chav Beis, Vayisrotzetzu Habanim B'kirba. As we know, they tussled inside of her, which inspires, or causes, I should say, Rivka to ask a very existential question. She went to seek out Hashem, and Hashem tells her that she has two nations in her womb. And then in verse 24, and then it came time for her to give birth. Verse 25, Esav is born. He's red. He's hairy. Pasuk 26. And they call, or his name is called Yaakov. He was holding on to the heel of Esav. Yitzchak ben Shishim Shana Beledo Sosam, and Yitzchak was 60 years old when they were born. Now here is the story of Yaakov and Esav, the beginning of the story of Yaakov and Esav. Although honestly, I should say the story already began in the womb, right? The story of Yaakov versus Esav is one that even precedes their birth. But this is where it advances forward. Vayigdalu hane'arim, they got older, right? So whatever early, however many years it was when the sale of the birthright took place, it was after they had grown up. Maybe they were 13 years old. Vayigdalu hane'arim vayhi Esav ish yodei atzayid ish sadeh. Esav was somebody who knew hunting, a man of the field. Yaakov ish tam yoshev ohalim. Yaakov was a homebody. He would sit in tents. Yitzchak loved Esav because he was a hunter, and Rivka loves Yaakov. Vayazed Yaakov Nazi. Now, out of the blue, Yaakov is making a stew. Vayazed Yaakov Nazi. Yaakov's making stew. Just, out of nowhere. Vayavo Esav min hasadeh v'hu ayef, and Esav comes from the field and he is tired. So the Torah presents us two independent facts, which coincide. Yaakov was cooking, Esav was tired from the field. Vayomer Esav el Yaakov haliteni no min hadom hazeh ki ayef anochi al ken kara shemo Edom. And Esav says to Yaakov, provide me, please, feed me from that that red dish for I am tired, I am weary. And he was called Edom, either because of this incident or because he really liked this particular food. Vayomer Yaakov. Now here's where we really get into things. Vayomer Yaakov, Michroch hayom es bechoras chali, which the most simple way of translating it is, sell me your bechora, sell me your birthright, sell me today your birthright. V'yomer Esav, hinei anochi holech lamus. Now the first thing I want to point out before I'm going to read some more, and I don't want to get into the analysis questions yet, but I just want to point out that Yaakov asks Esav to sell him his bechora. What is Yaakov's price, or what does Yaakov offer as the price for the bechora? So I just want to point out that it doesn't say. And by the way, I should have mentioned at the beginning, if anybody wants to ask a question, they can put it in the chat section, or you can unmute yourself and interrupt me, please, at any time. Please jump in with questions. So Vayomer Yaakov Michroch hayom es bechoras chali. Right? Yaakov says, sell me your bechora, but does Yaakov offer a price? Does Yaakov offer something in exchange of the bechora? So we read the story. Our mind makes certain associations either on its own or because of tradition, because we've learned or we've been taught something. But in this pasuk, you will not find a price or an offer. Right? Yaakov just says, sell me your birthright. We naturally make the connection, and the Medrash does, and commentators do. But let's understand the pshat first before we get into opinions. The pshat here, there's no price. Yaakov does not say, I'll give you the stew, if you give me your bechora. He doesn't say that. I just want to put that observation out there while we're reading the text. V'yomer Esav, hinei anochi holech lamus. Right? I am going to die. V'lama zeh li bechora. What do I need this bechora for? Now, again, if you're reading it that Yaakov says, give me your bechora in exchange for the stew, so then it makes sense for Esav to say, I don't need this bechora. Of course, I'll exchange it for the stew. But again, in this pasuk as well, Esav doesn't say, I will give you my bechora in exchange for the stew. V'yomer Yaakov, hishava li kayom vayishava lo. Swear to me today, and he swears. Vayimkores bechora sol Yaakov, and he sold his bechora to Yaakov. Does it say it was an exchange for the soup? No, it doesn't. V'Yaakov nosan le'esav, pasuk lamed daled, verse 34. V'Yaakov nosan le'esav lechem unezid adashim vayochal vayesht vayakom vayelach vayivez Esav es habechora. Yaakov gives to Esav bread and nezid adashim, a stew of lentils. He eats, he drinks, he gets up, he goes. Vayivez, he detests or scorns the birthright. Now, again, I'll just point out, V'Yaakov nasan le'esav, right? Yaakov gave to Esav lechem unezid adashim, which just means he gave. It could be read simply as just he gave it to him. It doesn't say he sold it to him. It doesn't say he sold it to him in exchange. Now, what you should be saying to yourselves is, but look at the exchange. Look at the back and forth in the pasuk, right? Yaakov says, Esav comes home saying Yaakov's cooking. Esav comes home and he's tired. Yaakov says, sell me the birthright. Esav says, I don't need this birthright. Yaakov says, sell me the birthright. Yaakov gives him food, and Esav despises the bechora. You look at the back and forth, and it looks like an exchange. it looks like a trade or a sale. The bechora for the stew, and that's how many look at this story, and certainly Chazal among them, and that is clearly a coherent way of reading the text. But if you slow down and you read the text carefully, and I don't think I'm artificially cutting apart the psukim. I think if you look, even with this whole exchange, which makes it even this back and forth in the psukim, which make it seem like an exchange, nevertheless, you look at each individual pasuk, you look at the language carefully. Nowhere does it say that the bechora was sold for the stew. Nowhere. No, it doesn't say. And this is an observation made by Rabbi Yaakov Tzvi Mecklenburg. Haksav HaKabbalah is his sefer on Chumash, and he makes this observation, and he points out as well that think about this transaction in contrast to the transaction that happened in last week's Parsha, in Parshas Chayei Sarah, where the Torah goes to great lengths to spell out very clearly that the Me'arah in Sdei Ephron, the cave of Machpelah in the field of Ephron, was sold for 400 shekel. It says it very clearly. It's like it's lawyers drawing up a contract to make sure that every detail is recorded accurately. That's what characterizes the sale of Marasa Machpelah. You cannot get around the fact that in last week's Parsha, it says that the field was sold for the 400. It's impossible because it says it black and white. And it repeats it. At the end, it says again, and it was sold. And on several occasions in the future, in Bereshis, it makes reference to the fact that this was the cave that Avram purchased. And yet here, you look at the detail, the rigorous detail of Marasa Machpelah, and compare it to this exchange, which is just as important. And it's much, much less clear and much, much less detailed. It does not say, it doesn't say anywhere the Bechorah was sold for the stew. Again, it's a perfectly cogent reading to read it that way, but it doesn't, it's just that very plain, clear language that this is an exchange for that is not here. It's very easy to put them together. I don't mean to repeat myself, but so you're right. The fact that Yaakov's making the stew, he says, "Sell me the bechorah," and then he gives him the stew, makes it seem like the stew is an exchange for the bechorah, but nevertheless, it's just not there. Nowhere it doesn't say it. It doesn't say it black on white. It doesn't say it in a way that a lawyer wouldn't be able to pick it apart in Isn't there like there's a course every lawyer takes in law school, contracts, right? Any student 1 week into contracts would look at this text and say, yeah, it doesn't really record the fact that there was a sale here. There's language of sale, michra chayom, vayim kores b'choraso, but it doesn't say that he sold the birthright for the stew. Okay, I've beaten that question to death. Let's now try to understand what we can do with that observation. So before we answer or try to explain this story based on the approach that perhaps one was not in exchange for the other, the bechorah wasn't in exchange for the stew, let's try to understand what the bechorah is. Right? We kind of take it for granted that we know what the bechorah is because okay, I see Ruth put in an excellent question. What does the Gemara say to this transaction before we look for answers in the oral Torah? So yeah, very good, exactly, right? So you look in Torah Shabbat Peh, and I can't give you a full answer. I don't know everything it says about this story, but it's clear, at least from the midrashim that Rashi quotes, that this is a sale. This is a straight transaction. But just wait. Let me show you what I mean when I show that there's a different way to read that. So what is the Bechora? We sort of take it for granted that we know that that Esav was born first, so he's the Bechor, and Yaakov wants to take that place, take that status for himself, and that's what he's trying to gain. And then we know from the end of the parsha that having the Bechora seems to mean that you are now entitled to certain brachos from Yitzchak that you might not have otherwise been entitled to. But what does it mean to be a Bechor? So the first thing I did was I looked at the few times that the Torah has already discussed or referenced a Bechor, and it's clear that there's something special about the Bechor. The first time we encounter the concept of Bechor is in Cain and Hevel, where Hevel offers mi Bechoros sono, right? Hevel's korban. One of the reasons why Hevel's korban is superior is because he offered mi Bechoros sono, right, from the firstborns. Following that, there are certain people who are identified as the Bechor. That there's clearly something significant about that. In the descendants of Noach, there's a reference to a Bechor. In the nephews of Avraham, in last week's Parsha, it makes reference to a Bechor. In the children of Yishmael, right? In the children of Yishmael, it makes reference to a Bechor. So we see already in the Torah, by the time you arrive at this story, the Torah has made several references to someone occupying a certain position, a certain status as the Bechor. But clearly, something we knew as special now takes center stage in this event, at this juncture, right? Something which we knew it was important. Now we realize is critically important because the Torah shines a light on the fact that Yaakov gains this Bechora from Esav. So the commentaries discuss at length what is this Bechora, and if you look at some of the different opinions, which I'll just review, we're not going to read them inside, but Rashi, when Rashi sees the Bechora, based on Chazal, as the entitlement to serve Hashem. That being a Bechor gives one a special role to serve Hashem. And so Rashi says that Yaakov said to himself, "Ein Rasha zeh kedai sheyakriv lakadosh baruch hu." Right? It's not fitting, it's not appropriate that this wicked person should serve Hashem. And so we know from later on in the Torah and from Chazal that it was the Bechorim who were first entitled to serve in the Mishkan, in the Beis Hamikdash, and they lose that right to the Kohanim. But before they lose that right, it was theirs, and it was something that clearly existed conceptually even before the giving of the Torah, as is reflected here. So for Rashi, what Rashi is reflecting is the fact that the Bechora has a spiritual significance, has a spiritual dimension. But you find other approaches. The Ibn Ezra, not taking the route of Chazal, no surprise, offers two possibilities. One is that we know that the Bechor is entitled to a double stake in the inheritance. We know this from later on in the Torah. In the Torah, in Halacha, right, a Bechor is entitled to Pi Shnayim. And so the Ibn Ezra says that perhaps perhaps what this entitlement, what's so special about the Bechorah here, is this double portion. Another answer that the Ibn Ezra offers is that the Bechor is entitled to a certain respect, just like one has to honor their father and mother, one has to honor the Bechor in a different way. Obviously, it's not the same thing, but there has to be a certain respect that is accorded to the Bechor, and that's what's being sold. That's what's being transferred here from Esav to Yaakov. So the Ibn Ezra's two opinions, that it's the double portion, or it's the entitlement to a certain respect. So we see that the Ibn Ezra is avoiding the more spiritual approach, that it's who gets to serve Hashem, and instead goes in a more material, I would say. It's not strictly material, but a more materialistic approach, that there are certain entitlements that go along with with having the Bechorah. Now, there are those who argue on the Ibn Ezra. There are other opinions that say that, wait a second, this whole concept of Pishnayim, of getting a double portion, that's something that's found in Halacha, given at Har Sinai. That happens later. Obviously, that gets us into the whole thing, like did the Avos observe the Torah? But that's what some argue on the Ibn Ezra. And so an opinion like Rabbeinu Bachia favors the other approach of the Ibn Ezra. The second one, that the Bechor is entitled to a certain amount of respect. He has a certain dominion over the younger children. And Rabbeinu Bachia says that's why Esav references the fact that he's going to die. Right? He says, "Listen, I live dangerously. I'm gonna die at some point. It doesn't. I don't really need the long-term benefits of being the Bechor, of being in charge and stuff like that. And so that's why he mentions the fact that he's going to die, and that's why he gives it up. Okay. So those are kind of the basic approaches that you find in the Rishonim. I have a couple other Rishonim here in my notes, which again, don't really say much more than what I've mentioned so far, but it's certainly certainly reflective of what we said before. Maybe I'll just add the Ramban. The Ramban says that perhaps it's not just having a certain stature above the other children, but it's a certain entitlement to inherit the stature of the father. I'll just quote briefly. Right? It makes sense to the Ramban that we're not talking about the double portion. Rather, it's to inherit malas ha'av, the stature of the father, ushuraso, and his authority. Sheyilo kavod umale al tzeiro, that he should have honor and station over whoever is younger, and that's why Esav says later on, "Ani bincha bichorecha," I am your son, your Bechor, meaning Esav still believes he should be able to earn his Yitzchak stature after him, and so that's what the Bechorah means. Now what the Ramban says, to me, kind of points in a direction that resonates with me a little bit more than the other approaches, namely this idea of earning the status or the stature of the father. And the reason why is because I've last number of years that I've been studying these parshios, I've grown more and more. More and more, I've developed this sense that a lot of these stories and individuals can be understood based on the concept of destiny. That Hashem has a certain destiny for these people. That's the bris, the covenant, and the actions of the protagonists are actions to either advance that destiny, to pursue that destiny, or to earn that destiny. And so the destiny of Yitzchak to continue to live out, to pursue the bris that Hashem makes with his father Abraham, that's what's at stake here. And so when the Ramban says, this is, that the Bechorah is to kind of earn the stature of the father, to me that makes a lot of sense, because clearly this event, this sale, this transfer has something to do with earning a certain bracha, a certain destiny from Yitzchak. But let me just pause just to look at the other question. Esav is limited and short-sighted, does not foresee nor understand the covenant with Hashem as Yaakov. Exactly. Thank you, Ruth. I agree with that 100%. And because Esav doesn't really intuit or understand or feel responsible to that bris, to that covenant, that's why he's so willing to give it up. But I want to come back to this sale, to this exchange. Now that we have a sense of what the Bechorah is and what it represents, or at least a couple possibilities, let's go back and look carefully at what goes on here. And I'm using the Haksav HaKabbalah of Rabbi Yaakov Tzvi Mecklenburg to guide me in this analysis, because I really think that there's something here. There's or just the opposite. There's something missing here. This notion that the Bechorah was sold for the stew. The pasuk doesn't say it. The pasuk doesn't say it outright. And so this is how the Ksav HaKabbalah reads this story. What he says is, first of all, what you have to understand is that Yaakov did not take advantage of Esav's weariness and manipulate him into selling something valuable. Because if you look at the text, there is no sale of a Bechorah in exchange for stew. It doesn't say that. There's no money that's exchanged here. Again, if you look at the story of Marasa Machpelah, it says very clearly, this was the price that was paid for Marasa Machpelah. It doesn't say that here. It doesn't say this was the price that was paid for the Bechorah. You would think something so important, if it was sold, the Torah would record that sale, but it's not there. And not only that, but food was not exchanged for the Bechorah, because again, it doesn't say that. So instead, the Ksav HaKabbalah argues something which we find in earlier opinions as well, earlier commentators, and that is that the food wasn't an exchange. The food was to memorialize a transfer. That there was a transfer that happened of the Bechorah. A transfer happened from Esav to Yaakov, that's for sure. But it wasn't in exchange for the stew, the eating. The eating was simply to memorialize that transfer, to give it prominence, to highlight it. We see several times in Bereshis where people sit down to eat in order to memorialize or to celebrate or to honor some sort of agreement that's been made. Like for instance, when Yaakov and Lavan finally part ways, they sit down, they have a meal, and then they go their separate ways. And so that's what's happening here. So what is being sold? So here, the much of what the Ksav HaKabbalah's point is based on is this word michra. Right, so if you look back at Pasuk Lamed Aleph, Vayomer Yaakov Michra Chayom Es Bechoras Chali. So what he argues is that Michra doesn't mean sell this to me, but rather Michra means that this was transferred. It was a Michra. It's a noun. It's not a verb. Michra as a verb is please, sell this to me, or not please, but sell this to me. It's not a verb. It's a noun. Michra chayom es bechoras chali. Your bechorah was transferred basically to me. Now, what does that mean? Where does that come from? So basically, what the Ksav HaKabbalah constructs is sort of a different a different exchange than what it seems from the psukim, and it's not so pashut pshat what the Ksav HaKabbalah is saying, I admit, but it's certainly compelling. And so basically, what happens according to the Ksav HaKabbalah is that Esav comes from the field and he's hungry, and Yaakov offered him food because he was making food. And not only that, but Yaakov gives him the food. So Esav's hungry, Yaakov's cooking, Yaakov gives him from his food. While Esav is eating, now that he's relaxed, now that he is, his guard is down, as it were, he begins to speak freely. And he begins to talk about the Bechorah and how unimportant it is to him. And that's the Vayomer Esav Hinei Anochi Holech Lamuz V'lama Zeli Bechorah, right? That's not a response to Yaakov's offer to sell it to him. It's a statement. He said it independently. And when he says this, the Ksav HaKabbalah argues that the Bechorah is something that is earned in addition to being born into. Meaning, the Bechorah represents a certain special destiny, but that destiny has to be acted upon. That destiny has to be grabbed, has to be taken, has to be seized. And basically what Esav was doing is relinquishing his rights, his interest in this Bechorah. The Ksav HaKabbalah uses the word hefker. Hefker is to make something ownerless. And basically, what Esav did was basically say, I don't care for it. I don't need it. I don't want it. And basically what Yaakov does when he hears that Esav does not want this Bechorah, and whatever this Bechorah represents, Yaakov asks for it. And Esav gives it to him. And one of the most important things the Ksav HaKabbalah points out that we kind of skip over when we think about this as a sale, an exchange, a transfer, is that Yaakov makes him swear. Why do you need a shavua? And I'll get to the comments in the chat in a second. I see them. But why does Yaakov make Esav swear? Vayomer Yaakov hishava li kayom vayishava lo. Vayim koras b'choras oli Yaakov. What do you have to swear about? It's an exchange. It's a sale, right? Sell it to him, give him a receipt, and go on your separate ways. What do you need an oath for? And so it makes a lot more sense to say that Esav is giving up the Bechorah. He's relinquishing his interest, his rights. He has no care for it. He's willing for Yaakov to take it, and Yaakov makes him take an oath that he has given this up and that Yaakov's now going to take it. So what does Vayim Koras B'choras Oli Yaakov? So Vayim Kor here doesn't literally mean he bought it with money, because it doesn't say, but Vayim Kor means he transferred it. He willingly gave up in a formal way. First, he spoke about it casually, and then Yaakov says, formally, give it over to me. And so that's what Vayim Kor means. Not an exchange for the stew, but he gave it up, because what the Bechor represents is destiny, and destiny has to be seized. You have to choose. You have to cast your lot into the destiny of the Jewish people. Here, we don't have a Jewish people yet. We have a family that made a bris, that made a covenant with Hashem. You want to be part of that covenant? You have to choose it. And Esav actively chooses not to be part of that covenant. And so when you get to the end of this exchange, when you get to the end of this back and forth with the psukim, it says, V'Yaakov nosan le'Esav lechem nuzid adashim. Yaakov nosan, he gave to him. So what the Ksav HaKabbalah notes is that If this is the ending of the story, if this is the last event of the story, it should have been Vayitein Yaakov le'esav lechem unuzid adoshim. If this stew was in exchange for the Bechorah, then it should have said Vayitein Yaakov le'esav lechem unuzid adoshim. But it doesn't say that. It says Yaakov nosan. And so what the Ksava Kabbalah says is that this pasuk is like a concluding pasuk recapping what happened. This is a summary of what happened. Yaakov Nasan. Yaakov gave, all the way at the beginning, Yaakov gave food to Esav. Vayivez Esav as a Bechorah, and Esav despised the Bechorah, and that's how it got to Yaakov. But not that it was an exchange. Yaakov Nasan is really, for those who have an appreciation of Dikduk, it's really telling. It's a really strange way of recording a final event, because it's not recording a final event. V'Yaakov Nasan le'Esav is, it doesn't make sense to say this in the past tense. It says Vayomer Yaakov Yishava Likayom V'Yishava Lo. They took a shvua, and then it should have then said Vayitein Yaakov, but it doesn't. It says V'Yaakov Nasan, because this is a summary, and it's Nasan, not Machar. Right? Nasan means he gave as a gift, because again, the stew was given. The stew was already given by Yaakov to Esav, and it was in the context of Yaakov giving the stew to Esav that the Bechorah came up as a topic of discussion, and Yaakov claimed it from Esav. It is true that there was a special Bechorah that Esav could have earned for himself, that Esav could have pursued had he chosen to pursue it, but he didn't. And again, I'm repeating myself here. The fact that there's a shavua reflects the fact that you don't have a sale here. You don't need a shavua if there is a sale, if there is a transaction. If there is no sale, if there is no transaction, then you need a shavua. And that's what Yaakov captures. And it actually reminds me of something Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs said in last week's Parsha, which I mentioned in one of my drushos last week. The idea that this is a Zichrono Livracha, of course, that this idea that Avram had to buy land that was given to him by Hashem, right? Hashem says, I'm giving you this land. I'm giving you this land of Canaan. And yet Avram has to go and buy it. Without getting into all the details of what Rabbi Sachs explained, his bottom line is that even though Hashem promises us something, there are times when we have to claim that promise for ourselves. We have to work to get it. We have to earn it. And so that's what's happening here as well, I believe. That the Bechorah, that to be able to inherit Yitzchak, in order to carry on the legacy of Yitzchak, in order to earn what Yitzchak has, there may be some promise, some entitlement that's given to the Bechor, but just because that entitlement is there, just that because that promise is there, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get it. You have to earn it. You have to seize it. You have to capture it. And Yaakov, by becoming the person he was, earned that Bechorah or claimed that Bechorah. And Esav, by being the person he was, actively renounced that Bechorah. He renounced it in the way that he wanted to renounce it. He seems to want to claim part of it. When you look at the last episode of the Parsha, when it comes time to get the bracha from Yitzchak, Esav still believes that he's entitled to something, but he's not, because he relinquished the important parts of the Bechorah, the spiritual destiny. And so when you look at opinion like Rashi, who says that the Bechorah is who gets to serve Hashem, I understand now more from a pshat perspective why Rashi would say that. Because there's a certain special destiny that has to do with serving Hashem that is bound up in this Bechorah. Let me go to the comments that were posted. Ellen says, the incident between Yaakov and Esav is fulfilling the prophecy of Rivka. Without that transfer, Yaakov cannot justify going into the blessing of the firstborn. Oh, excellent. I'm glad you mentioned that, Ellen. You're absolutely right. Because how do I know it's the destiny? How do I know there's a certain destiny here? Because there was a prophecy that was given to Rivka. V'rav yavod sa'ir. Right? The greater will serve the younger. Now, I don't want to get into questions of determinism, but I think what that indicates is that Hashem has a destiny in store. And Yaakov has to capture that destiny. And Esav has to give it up, which he does actively. Vayivez Esav es abechora. And the final thing, Ruth wrote in, why is the word poor used? Is it not instant gratification? It does not want future investment. I'm not sure what you mean by the word poor. Yaakov Nosan. So I think there is an element of that, Ruth. That clearly Esav is looking at what he gets immediately, and so because of that, the fact that he says, I don't really need to think about the future. I don't really need to think about my own destiny. I really am just concerned with the here and now. I think that that's very much in line with what we're saying. That this notion of instant gratification does emerge from Esav's behavior and from what Esav is doing. Esav is looking at the short term. And the short-term benefits of having this Bechorah, he doesn't understand them, because the Bechorah is really about the future and the long term. The Bechorah is really about the future destiny. So I think that observation is a really good one. So I think when you read this story carefully, the Haksava Kabbalah makes a very, very compelling case that what's going on here is not a sale, and that really works with my own perspective that the actions of the protagonists throughout Bereshis are all about realizing a certain destiny that's in store for them. Especially, I think I first came to this idea. I don't think it's a huge chiddush. I think you can easily read things that way anyway. But Yosef and his dreams. Yosef and his dreams are all about Yosef being told he has a special destiny, and then Yosef has to figure out what that special destiny is. Here, for Yaakov, Yosef's father, that destiny clearly emerges from the kind of person he is, what he knows Hashem has established as a covenant with Avram and Yitzchak, and how he has to capture that destiny for himself. And Esav actively gives it up, and that's how the story progresses from there. It is possible to take this idea and then read the story of the brachos more carefully. The Ksava Kabbalah notes that when you get to the brachos, Esav refers to himself as bincha b'chorecha, whereas Yaakov says b'chorecha. And he sees a contrast in that. The fact that Esav says bincha b'chorecha, your son, the Bechor, means that Esav thinks he can still retain something from the fact that he was born first, even though he gave up the Bechorah. That perhaps he's entitled to the material entitlements of being a Bechor. Whereas Yaakov doesn't say bincha b'chorecha, right? He's not naturally the firstborn, but he is the one who does capture the destiny of the Bechorah. And the destiny is something spiritual, something not material, and through that Yaakov earns, and what I've said all along is that when Yitzchak knows he's blessing Yaakov at the end, he gives him Birkas Avraham. So even Yitzchak intuits, without Yitzchak even knowing that this Bechorah was transferred from Esav to Yaakov, Yitzchak intuits, he knows, he understands that Yaakov is the one who really appreciates the destiny of what the Avos are working towards, the destiny that's bound up in that bris that Hashem makes with the Avos. All right, thank you all for joining this morning. It's great to see you. If anybody has any questions, you can feel free to unmute yourself or put it in the chat. Otherwise, have a great week and have a great Shabbos.